Hey guys, tonight we are wandering straight into the reeking, smoke-stained corridors of Tudor England, where romance is mostly a myth, hygiene is a rumour, and your personal space is a luxury item you will never afford. You will feel the damp creeping into your bones before you even open your eyes, and when you finally do, you will probably regret it. This isn't the glamorous world of kings and queens you see in paintings with polished floors and flattering candlelight. This is the everyday world, the place where ordinary people lived and sweated and slept and tried, badly, to be intimate in conditions that would make a modern person faint. And I will warn you right now, you probably would not survive this. Not because of some dramatic battlefield or plague pit, although those exist too, but because you will be lucky to get through a week without lice, fleas, or someone coughing directly into your mouth. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and tell me in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is there. I always love seeing the little constellation of places and hours glowing across the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake in the grey half-light of a Tudor morning, the kind where the cold air settles in your throat and your breath forms faint clouds as you exhale. Your back aches even though you barely moved in your sleep. And when you shift, the straw beneath you crunches in that unmistakable way that means something inside the mattress has probably died at some point. You feel the texture of the linen sheet, stiff from too many nights of sweat and too few washings, and you become aware of the gentle scuttling sensation near your ankles that you try very hard to pretend is the wind. It is not the wind. You pull your legs up instinctively, and your first conscious breath of the morning smells like smoke, damp wool, human bodies, and the faint sourness of last night's ale. This is your room, your home, your private space, except it isn't private at all. You turn your head and see two of your younger siblings still tangled in their blankets beside you, their hair matted from sleep. Across the room, a small shape rises and falls beneath another thin blanket. Your mother, snoring the way she always does when she falls asleep after tending the fire past midnight. If you are a servant, there may be more bodies, other girls your age or older women who grunt and shift during the night, each one radiating their own warmth and scent until the whole room becomes a stew of layered human presence. And if you are unlucky or simply poor, there may be animals inside with you, a goat shifting its hooves on the packed earth floor, a hen scratching in the corner, a cat darting across the room because it has found a mouse, which is probably the one small creature you are grateful for because it eats the things that eat you. There is no concept of intimacy here. At least not as you understand it. There is no bedroom the way modern people imagine one, a place meant for rest, privacy, or romantic connection. You live in a single room that performs every function: cooking, sleeping, eating, arguing, embracing, grieving. If you are extremely wealthy, perhaps you have a separate chamber, but even then the walls are thin, the floors carry sound, and the servants walk in and out constantly. Nothing you do is ever just yours. You roll to the edge of the bed and sit up, rubbing your face with hands that are already dusty because everything in the room seems to attract soot. The hearth smoulders faintly, coughing up the occasional spark, and outside the window, if you even have one, the morning is just beginning to glow. But before you can step out, you feel the weight of the thick air pressing down. It carries the smell of bodies unwashed for days, sometimes weeks, because bathing regularly is strange, suspicious even. People believe it opens your pores and lets disease inside, so cleanliness is a danger rather than a virtue. And that means nobody around you is clean enough for comfort, especially not for closeness. You reach down to pick up the camise you slept in, though whether you slept in it or simply continued wearing it for days on end is hard to remember. It is rough, made of linen that never truly softens no matter how often it is worn. You know it smells. Everyone knows they smell. But Tudor people do not speak much about smell because they have no choice but to tolerate it. It is so universal it becomes invisible, like the constant itching or the thin coating of soot on your skin. You stand, stretch, and feel the ache in your back, a reminder that the ropes under your mattress have loosened again. They always loosen. Every few nights someone has to tighten them. The origin of the phrase "sleep tight," pulling the ropes taut enough that the bed does not collapse into a sagging hammock. But even tightly woven ropes cannot erase the fact that your mattress is essentially a sack of straw live with tiny creatures. You sleep on it anyway because it is better than the floor. You move through the room quietly, stepping over siblings and blankets, and that one spot on the floor that always squeaks. If you are a woman, your day begins before sunrise. You fetch water from the outdoor barrel or the nearest stream, depending on your station. If you live in a city, the streets are filled with refuse, chamber pot slop and mud, so every step through the morning mist brings a new scent you would rather forget. If you live in the countryside, the air is fresher, but still heavy with smoke and animals. Either way, the water you collect is cold, murky, and rarely safe to drink without boiling. When you return, the room has warmed slightly, though the warmth mostly comes from the sheer number of bodies inside it. Your mother sits up, rubbing her eyes, and begins to stir the ashes in the hearth, coaxing the weak flames back to life. You hand her the water, and she splashes a bit onto her face in a brisk utilitarian motion. That is the closest thing to a bath she will get today. You may do the same, just enough to feel slightly less crusted with sweat, but not enough to be considered indulgent or suspicious. Then you begin to prepare breakfast, which is less a meal and more a task. Gruel, bread, if you are lucky, maybe a bit of dried fish or cheese. The room fills with steam from the pot, soaking into the rafters, making the air even heavier. You think for a moment about stepping outside to breathe fresh air, but you know you do not have time. And this is the environment in which intimacy is expected to happen. In a room with no real walls where families sleep shoulder to shoulder, where the sound of someone coughing can drown out your own breathing. Privacy is so rare it becomes mythic. The few moments you have alone with your thoughts are stolen at dawn or in the cold outdoors, never inside. What you do not have is a quiet night with your husband or your lover. What you do not have is candlelight flickering across your skin in some romantic tableau. Candlelight is expensive. Firewood is precious. You do things in the dark because it is cheaper that way. A real Tudor historical fact. Most people bathed only a handful of times per year, and many believed that bathing could make you sick. One recorded minister even boasted that he had never washed his entire body in his life. The idea of daily washing would strike many Tudor people as dangerous or decadent. And then there is your fringe detail of the chapter. Many households used the same straw mattress for years, without replacing the stuffing, meaning that inside it you would find insects, mold, and often the remains of old food or dead vermin that had crawled in and never crawled out. You slept on that every night. You breathed the air that rose from it, and if you dared to come close to someone else, you brought all of that with you. You carry water to the basin, scrub your hands and feel the cold slice into your skin. It wakes you fully, but it also reminds you how vulnerable your body feels in this era. There is no softness here, no luxury, no sense of comfort. Everything is hard, rough, and worn. Even the wood that makes up your bed is splintered and dry, threatening to jab you if you roll the wrong way. If you want intimacy, you must seek it amid all of this, and there is little incentive to try. As the morning continues, the household stirs. Children begin their chores, men prepare for labor, and women begin the endless cycle of cooking, washing, stitching, and tending. But even in all this movement, even in the hustle of daily life, the absence of privacy never leaves you. There is no moment, aside from a lucky sliver of time after dark, when you can be alone with your own body, let alone another's. And that is where the first hint of dread creeps in. Because you know that sooner or later you will be expected to share this bed, this room, this air, with someone who demands closeness in a world built entirely to crush the possibility of it. You know that you cannot say no. You know that when night comes and the fire dwindles and the room grows still, you will lie on your back on that mattress of straw, listening to your siblings breathe beside you or your mother sigh in her sleep, and you will feel the ropes groan beneath your weight as someone climbs into the space beside you. For now, you move through the morning motions, but the reality of the night always lingers. It is there in the tightness of your chest, in the knowledge that your body is never truly yours in this time, not in this place, not under these laws. And as you step outside to fetch more water or to shake out the blankets, you breathe the cold air deeply and feel it sting your lungs, and you think, just for a moment, how strange it is that the outdoors feels like the only place where you can breathe freely. But you cannot stay outside forever. You return to the room, to the space that will be your world for years, maybe for the rest of your life. And as the sun rises higher and light filters through the shutters, you feel the full weight of Tudor life settle over you. The noise, the bodies, the stink, the constant presence of others, and you understand, finally, that in this world, intimacy is not tender or private or gentle. It is something you endure, something you learn to accept quietly, something that happens in darkness, in discomfort, under the weight of obligation rather than affection. You move through the rest of your morning, carrying the heaviness of Tudor life inside your bones, the sense that everything around you is coated in a thin film of fatigue and age, even the things that should feel fresh like daylight or water. When you step outside, the air hits you with that cool, metallic sharpness particular to English mornings, and for a moment you imagine breathing deep enough to clear the sleep from your lungs. But the smell of wood smoke reaches you before you can finish the breath, followed by the distant odor of refuse from the street or pigsty, depending on where you live. Either way, nothing here ever feels clean. Not the air, not the water, certainly not your body. You bend to scoop water from the barrel, watching it shift under the surface with that murky green-brown cloudiness that makes you hesitate, even though hesitation is pointless. You scoop the water anyway because this is all you have, and you know better than to waste time longing for a clear stream or a polished basin. The cold bites your fingers as you lift the bucket, and the shock runs up your arm in a way that forces your eyes fully open. You blink at the light, at the faint mist still clinging to the ground, and you almost laugh at the thought of washing your face with this water, but you do it anyway. The splash is brutal, a slap of cold that tightens your jaw and beads on your skin like droplets on stone. This is what Tudor cleanliness feels like. A shock of icy water across your cheeks, maybe across your neck if you are feeling brave. You do not wash your hair, you do not wash your whole body. You do not strip down entirely unless you are preparing for some medical emergency or someone has died. Full washing is dangerous. People believe it weakens your body, that it opens your pores and makes your insides vulnerable to disease. Some even believe the warm air after a bath can kill you faster than any infection. Water is not something you trust. It holds sickness, rumors of plague, mud from the river, and waste that always finds its way back into places where it should not be. You return inside with the bucket, watching the steam curl from the pot as your mother stirs it with slow, deliberate motions. The air has already thickened again, filled with breath and smoke, and the scent of damp cloth drying too slowly. When you lift your hand to wipe your face, you feel the rough cloth of your sleeve scratch across your cheek, and you realize that even after splashing water, your skin still feels unclean. But this is normal for everyone around you. You are not singled out. You are not unusual. Every body in Tudor England carries its own weather system of scents and textures, its own accumulation of sweat, soot, and old cloth. You think for a moment about how rarely you have ever seen your own reflection. There might be a shard of polished metal somewhere in your home or the home you serve in, but it will be too warped to reveal much. Most people go their entire lives without truly seeing themselves. They feel their faces rather than observe them. They live inside bodies that are not measured by beauty or comfort but by survival, fertility, and strength for labor. Even recognizing your own dirtiness becomes a kind of intuition rather than observation. You smell it before you see it. You feel the texture of your skin change from dry to grimy, and those sensations stay with you all day, clinging to your clothing and your thoughts. You reach up, fingers threading through your hair, and you feel how stiff it has become. The strands are held together by natural oils, dust, and the subtle crunch of soot from the hearth. Washing your hair is out of the question, unless you want to risk gossip or sickness. Hair washing happens a few times per year. If that, you braid it instead, tucking it out of the way, knowing full well that the braid will not feel soft or clean. It will feel like a rope twisted from smoke and sweat. But this is the Tudor way. You accept it, just as you accept the dryness around your nails and the faint, itchy burn on the inside of your elbow where your camise rubbed against your skin all night. As you move through the small space, you glance toward the others in your household, noticing their hair, their clothes, their faces. Your younger siblings' cheeks are dirty, smudged with sleep, and your mother's hair hangs loose around her shoulders in a grey-touched curtain of knots. No one comments on it. No one expects her to fix it immediately. There is work to do, meals to prepare, floors to sweep, water to fetch. Cleanliness is not a daily ritual here, but a luxury reserved for saints, nobles, or those who have nothing else to spend their hours on. You step outside again to shake out a blanket, and the cold rushes against your skin like an unexpected mercy. For a moment you imagine what it would feel like to strip down and plunge into a river the way modern people do. But you know that in your era rivers are filled with filth, and people would stare at you as if you were mad. Only those without shame or sanity would submerge themselves entirely in public water, especially women, and even if you had access to a private bath, the water would be heated painstakingly with firewood that your household cannot spare, and then it would cool too quickly to be comfortable. You think again about the mattress, its straw filling, the way it smells when you lie down at night, a mixture of stale air, dust, and the faint sourness of mold. You remember the scratching sensation on your skin, the feeling of something tiny moving against your thigh or your calf. At night you sometimes wake to the sound of fleas bursting between your fingernails as you scratch. But you accept this too. Everyone lives with fleas. Everyone carries them like an unwanted accessory. There is even a strange, half-joking pride in having enough warmth to attract them. It means you are alive. It means your blood still flows. A verified historical fact threads through your memory. Wealthy Tudor people owned linen undergarments that they believed kept them clean because they absorbed sweat and dirt. Instead of washing their bodies, they changed their linens, convinced that the cloth would purify their skin. The cleaner the linen, the cleaner the person. They relied on layers of fabric rather than water, seeing the cloth as a shield against impurity. Meanwhile, the poor often had only one set of clothes, worn day after day until it stiffened from use. Your fringe detail whispers into your mind next, the kind that sits just on the edge of belief. Some Tudors believed that washing your genitals too often could weaken your fertility or attract demonic attention, as if water itself were a spiritual invitation. Women were especially warned against frequent rinsing, told it could cool the womb or invite illness. So even the most intimate parts of the body remained unwashed, hidden beneath layers of cloth and superstition. This creates a strange awareness in you now as you move through the room again. Still feeling the lingering chill from outside, you realize that in this era, the human body is not treated as something to care for or cherish. It is a tool, a vessel, a thing to preserve but not pamper. People speak of their bodies the way they speak of their fields or their tools, something to maintain just enough to keep functioning. There is no indulgence here. There is certainly no spa day. You smell like smoke, your clothes smell like smoke, and the walls themselves smell like smoke. Everything is seasoned with it. The day continues slowly, the room warming with the heat of the fire and the presence of bodies. When the pot of gruel is ready, you serve it into wooden bowls, feeling the rough surface beneath your fingers. As you eat, you taste the faint bitterness of ashes, as if they have drifted into the food. You swallow anyway, You have no choice. And as you sit close to the others, shoulders pressed together, elbows brushing, you become acutely aware of the collective odor rising from all of you. It is not a single scent, but a tapestry of them: sweat, wool, earth, smoke, old leather, and the slightest edge of decay from clothes that have never fully dried. You breathe it in because there is no escape, and this is the world where intimacy becomes expected, where bodies are pressed together not out of desire but necessity. You shiver slightly at the thought, not entirely because of the cold. When the chores begin, you take your place among them. If you are a maid, you scrub wooden boards with sand or stale urine, because urine has ammonia and acts as a cleaner. If you are a farm wife, you gather eggs or feed livestock. Every motion produces sweat. You feel it forming beneath your arms, between your legs, along your back. It gathers quickly because your clothing is heavy, made of wool that traps heat and dampness. By midday, your chemise clings to your skin and your hairline grows damp. You wipe your forehead with the back of your hand, but it does little good. You can feel your own smell deepening throughout the day, blending with the perpetual smoke that drifts from the hearth. When you lift your arm even slightly, you catch the sour tang of sweat beneath layers of linen. You imagine washing, even for a moment, but you know it will not happen. Maybe next month, if the weather warms, maybe after the next feast day, maybe if someone dies and the mourning rituals require it. By afternoon, the heat from the fire and the bodies in the room become almost oppressive. You open the door to let in a bit of fresh air, but it only mixes with the other scents, refusing to overwrite them. The sky outside is grey, the kind of grey that feels heavy rather than soothing. The wind carries the smell of damp wood and wet earth. Sometimes it carries worse. You remember that someone emptied a chamber pot outside earlier, and the memory alone makes your stomach tighten. You return inside, closing the door to keep out the cold, and the warm, thick air envelops you again. You sit for a moment, feeling the heaviness of your clothing, the sensation of grime on your skin, the knowledge that this is your permanent state. You are not clean. You will not be clean tomorrow. You will not be clean next week. Cleanliness is a fleeting accident in Tudor England, a momentary brush with water that barely touches the surface. And yet, despite all of this, intimacy remains a duty. You know that eventually someone will expect your body to be available, even though your body feels like a stranger to you. You know that in this era, desire is irrelevant, hygiene is non-existent, privacy is impossible, and still the expectation remains. You are meant to share your bed, your breath, your sweat, your skin, with another person who is just as unwashed, just as grimy, just as coated in smoke and fatigue as you are. You breathe in, slowly letting the smoky air settle in your lungs like dust, and you realize that in Tudor England, sex is not just uncomfortable, it is the final layer of a life built on dirt, superstition, fear and obligation. It happens in darkness, on a mattress alive with fleas, between bodies that have forgotten what it means to feel clean. The afternoon light slants through the shutters in thin, dusty lines, turning the air inside your home into a soft, glittering haze that almost looks beautiful, until you remember it is not made of magic or sunbeams, but of soot, flour dust, and the invisible remains of what everyone has been breathing out all day. You feel it clinging to your eyelashes, catching in your throat, settling on your skin in ways that make you want to rub your arms raw just to feel like yourself again. But you do not rub them, you do not complain. This is the kind of discomfort you learn to swallow silently in Tudor England, because everyone else around you feels it too. No one has ever known anything else. You move toward the hearth to stir what remains of the midday meal. The fire crackles, sending sparks into the air, and a faint, greasy smell rises from the pot, clinging to your clothes. The heat pushes close, almost suffocating, but you welcome it because it means the cold will retreat for a little while. You hear footsteps outside, the sound muffled by the thick mud that coats the path. When the door opens, a gust of outdoor scent rushes in, Damp soil, smoke from another chimney, the sharp tang of manure from a passing cart, and for a brief second the mixture almost smells better than the stale air inside. But the person entering brings something else with them, something you smell before you even turn your head. Sweat soaked deeply into wool, the musk of a body worked to exhaustion, and the faint metallic scent of hands stained by daily labor. This is your husband, or perhaps your future husband, or simply the man who has authority over this household. He steps in, squinting as his eyes adjust to the dimmer light, and you take in the full sensory reality of him. His hair is matted from sweat and dirt, his cheeks streaked with grime, and his breath carries the sour tang of ale. He wipes his hands on his tunic, leaving darker smudges where the filth transfers. When he steps closer, the warmth of his body reaches you before his voice does. You realize instantly that he likely smells worse than you do, and the thought coils coldly inside your stomach because you know what expectations accompany his presence. His day has been long, filled with labor, with weather, with the demands of an existence that grinds men down as surely as it grinds women down. But none of that excuses the way he will expect your body to be available later, even though neither of you resembles the romantic figures imagined by poets or painters. You are two unwashed bodies living in a world without soap, without privacy, without the luxury of affection. As he sits to remove his shoes, the smell of damp leather and old sweat rises into the room. You breathe through it as discreetly as you can, but it is hard not to notice. In this era, a man's feet often go unwashed for months. His shoes trap heat and moisture, creating the perfect environment for fungal infections and sores. You know this because you have tended to such issues before, cleaning them with vinegar or herbs or whatever you can find. The memory of those tasks and the smell that accompanied them rises vividly now as you watch him rake his fingers through his hair. Your mind drifts, as it has so many times before, to the reality that intimacy in Tudor England has very little to do with desire and everything to do with economy. Marriages are arranged early, sometimes well before either person reaches adulthood. A girl can be promised as young as 12, sometimes younger. The church says 14 is the youngest acceptable age for marriage, but enforcement is loose, and consent is a flexible concept defined entirely by fathers, uncles, or masters. You have no say in it. You never did. You remember hearing about a girl in a neighboring village, married at 13 to a man who could have been her father. The wedding was small, the feast modest, and by the time she reached 15 she had already buried a child. Her womb was simply not ready. Her body had not finished growing, yet she was expected to endure adult responsibilities, including sex, which she likely did not understand fully until the moment it happened. You think about her sometimes, especially now as you look at the man across the room who might expect similar things from you. The cultural weight of marriage in this era is enormous. It isn't about love. It isn't even about compatibility. It is about alliances, property, livestock, and labor. Marrying young ensures a longer childbearing window, which society considers a blessing. A woman's worth is measured in her ability to survive birth and produce children who survive infancy, an expectation made more chilling by the knowledge that both processes often kill her. And so your body becomes a tool, a bargaining chip, a vessel. People speak of you with words like fertile, sturdy, and sound, as though you were a cow being appraised. The more children you can bear, the more valuable you are, and the sooner you begin, the better. You remember the whispers from older women when you first bled, the way they looked at you with a mix of pity and practicality. They explained your duty, your future, the expectations attached to your fertility. Some of them offered advice about how to endure your wedding night. None of them spoke about pleasure. Pleasure is not something Tudor women are encouraged to think about. Pleasure belongs to men. Women are told to lie still, be obedient, and produce heirs. But beneath those societal expectations lies something darker, something that unsettles you each time you think about it. The utter lack of consent in most marriages of this era. You know that once a woman is married, she has no legal right to refuse her husband. Her body becomes his property. The church reinforces this idea by describing marriage as a duty of obedience for wives, emphasizing that a woman must submit to her husband's needs, even if she feels fear or pain. Men are taught that their authority is divine. Women are taught that resistance is sin. You think about this as the man across the room stands again, stretching his arms, rolling his shoulders, preparing to shed the heavy cloak of his day. The sight of him triggers a mixture of instinctive caution and weary resignation within you. You know that when the sun sets and the fire dims, he will likely reach for you. You also know that if you say no, it will not matter. You can delay, but you cannot refuse. Legally, morally, socially, you belong to him. A verified historical fact comes to mind. Sharp as a blade in Tudor England, marital rape is not considered a crime. The law does not recognize the possibility that a husband could violate his wife. The very concept is nonsensical to them because a wife has no bodily autonomy to begin with. Her consent is assumed by the act of marriage itself. This is the unspoken truth that hangs like fog between you and the man across the room, a truth that shapes every interaction, every quiet moment, every long night. Your fringe detail settles in next. Chilling in its own small way, some Tudor wedding customs involved escorting the couple to their marriage bed and observing the linens afterward, not only for signs of consummation, but also for proof of virginity. Families would sometimes stand outside the bedchamber door, listening for the sounds of sex to ensure the marriage was legitimate. In more extreme cases, witnesses would enter the room to inspect the sheets immediately afterward, searching for blood. If none appeared, the woman could be accused of deception or immorality. You imagine that scene now. People gathered, waiting, judging, listening for the most private act of your life. Your stomach tightens. The man across the room moves closer, reaching for a cup of ale. As he drinks, his throat works in a way that distracts you from your thoughts for a moment. His presence is large, not just physically but in the space he occupies inside your expectations. When he sets the cup down and wipes his mouth with the back of his hand, he looks at you as though he is seeing you for the first time today, but his gaze does not land on your face. It lands on your body, on the work-worn curves beneath your layers of clothing, on your hands, on your hair, on the shape of you that he believes is his to claim. You stiffen slightly, though you try to hide it by turning toward the hearth. The heat flares, warming your cheeks until they sting. Your mind drifts again, this time to the stories you have heard from older women describing their first nights, their first months, their first years of marital intimacy. Some speak with resigned fondness, others with quiet bitterness, and a few with a haunted distance that tells you more than their words ever could. One woman you once knew told you that her wedding night felt like being swallowed whole. She said she lay there in darkness, listening to the wind outside, waiting for the moment to end, for the pain to ease. She said she felt like she was leaving her body, floating somewhere above herself while it all happened. When she finished, she whispered that she never once felt pleasure, not in all 20 years of marriage. You remember her voice now, the way it cracked slightly, as if the memory itself hurt more than the act ever did. You move to the table, smoothing the rough wood with your fingers, and the man follows, sitting heavily on the bench. The light catches the side of his face, revealing lines you had never noticed before, a weariness etched into his skin. You wonder, not for the first time, if he ever thinks about the way his expectations weigh on you, if he ever considers the imbalance between your desires and his, if he has any idea how little room there is for your comfort in this world. But you know the answer. He does not think about it. The culture does not teach him to. The church does not require him to. The law certainly does not compel him to. And so you sit together in the quiet half-light of your home, sharing the thick air, the stale smells, the heavy weight of unspoken duty. You listen to the fire crackle, to the children shifting in their sleep, to the distant sound of a dog barking outside. You feel your own pulse in your throat, in your fingers, in the hollow space beneath your ribs. You wonder how many women before you have sat like this, waiting for night to fall, waiting for the moment when the thin line between obligation and fear blurs completely. As the sun sinks lower, the room fills with shadows, the corners growing soft and indistinct. The man rises to latch the door, closing out the cold and the world beyond. As he does, the room tightens around you, becoming smaller, darker, more intimate in ways you do not want. Your breath catches, and for a moment you consider stepping outside under the pretense of fetching more water or firewood. But the night air will be freezing, and he will follow you, asking what is wrong. So you stay. The fire burns low, casting warm, flickering shapes across the walls. You can feel the heat on your legs, the familiar itch of your woolen stockings rubbing against your skin. The man moves closer, his footsteps soft, the smell of his body stronger. Now that he has removed some of his outer clothing, you feel the weight of his expectations settling on you like another layer of cloth, like a shawl you did not ask for. You inhale slowly, trying to steady yourself, reminding your body that this is survival, that this is the world you were born into, that resistance is not just dangerous but meaningless. You remind yourself that countless women before you endured the same, that countless women after you will too. And as you finally turn to face him, the room filled with darkness and the faint glow of embers, you understand with aching clarity that in Tudor England, sex is not an act of love or joy. It is a transaction, a duty, a burden you must carry. It is something done to you rather than with you, something you brace yourself for, something that defines your life without ever considering your heart. The night presses against the shutters as though the darkness itself wants to seep into your home, sliding between the wooden boards and settling into the corners like an uninvited guest. The fire has dimmed to a slow pulse, each ember glowing with the faint red of a tired heartbeat. You sit near it, your hands folded in your lap, waiting for the room to become quiet enough for you to hear your own breathing. The children have fallen asleep in a huddled cluster of blankets, their little bodies curled into shapes that make you think of animals in a burrow, all warmth and instinct. Even the air feels muffled, softened by exhaustion. But your mind is not soft. It sharpens itself on the worry you keep trying to swallow, the kind that sits in your stomach like a stone. You know what tonight means. Not just the routine expectation of marital intimacy, but the slow, constant pressure of an entire culture built around one idea. Your virginity was never yours. It was a commodity, a family asset, a public concern, a thing people guarded, discussed, bargained with, and demanded proof of. And now, even after marriage, the echoes of that pressure cling to you like smoke. You stand and move toward the narrow chest where your linens are kept. Though chest is a generous word for what is essentially a rough wooden box with a lid that never closes properly. You lift the edge and feel the resistance of wood swollen by years of damp air. Inside, the sheets lie folded unevenly, their colors dulled by age and use, each one a witness to nights just like this one. You smooth a hand over the top sheet and notice the coarseness of the fabric, the wool fibers prickling your skin. Even clean linen feels rough in this era. It is not made for comfort but durability. You take the sheet and shake it out gently, raising a small cloud of dust motes that swirl in the firelight like something alive. In Tudor England, linen is more than fabric. It is a symbol, a record, a battlefield where the most intimate expectations of your life have been written and rewritten without your consent. The sheet was there on your wedding night, a silent judge waiting to display its verdict. You remember that night with a clarity that makes your throat tighten, the way your hands trembled, the way your thoughts scattered like frightened birds, the way the household waited outside, pretending not to wait, pretending not to strain their ears for any sound that would confirm the ritual they were all expecting. You spread the sheet across the bed now, feeling the uneven texture beneath your fingers, the ridges where patches have been sewn over holes. The bed itself groans under the pressure, the ropes beneath the mattress straining with each shift of weight. You catch yourself holding your breath, as though the memory of that first night has stolen the air from your lungs again. You were told that your purity was a virtue, a treasure, a necessary part of your identity. But what it really was, you now understand, was a burden, something you carried on your shoulders while everyone around you inspected it, guarded it, or threatened it. From childhood, people told you that your worth depended on whether you could prove you were untouched. They spoke of virginity as though it was something fragile like glass that could be broken without you noticing. An accidental brush of a knee, an unchaperoned walk, a rumor whispered by someone jealous, anything could compromise it. You remember how careful you had to be growing up, how you learned to keep your eyes lowered, your voice soft, your steps quiet. You remember being told not to sit too close to the baker's son, not to linger near the fields, not to let your skirt ride too high when you climbed a fence. You remember the fear woven into every lesson, fear of being marked as impure, fear of losing your value, fear of bringing shame to your family. Because in Tudor England, a woman's virginity belongs not to her but to the men around her. Her father guards it as an investment. Her husband claims it as a right. Her community watches it as entertainment. The idea that you could simply choose what to do with your own body is unthinkable to them. Choice is not part of the equation. Marriage is not about romance, but about lineage, inheritance, alliances, and proof. And proof in this world is always written in blood. You sit on the edge of the bed, the mattress sinking beneath you. The straw inside rustles like dry leaves, and a faint tickling sensation creeps up your leg as something small shifts inside the stuffing. You ignore it. You are used to ignoring things. You lift your hands to your lap and breathe deeply, letting the smoky air fill your lungs even though it carries the taste of old wood and damp cloth. The memory of your wedding night drifts back, uninvited but persistent. You were led into the room by older women, your mother, your aunts, maybe even your sister-in-law, each one wearing an expression that tried to be supportive, but ended up looking more like resignation. They lit a candle, not for romance but inspection. The wick sputtered, sending shadows up the walls, and the air smelled like beeswax and anxiety. The man who was now your husband stood awkwardly near the bed, scratching the back of his neck, avoiding your eyes. You were both nervous, though for very different reasons. He was nervous about performance, about expectations, about proving his masculinity. You were nervous about pain, about humiliation, about the unknown. No one had explained intimacy to you beyond vague warnings and whispered advice. You were told what was expected but not what to expect. The women left the room eventually, but their presence lingered like a pressure on your skin. The candle flame flickered with every movement, creating a strange, trembling light that seemed to pulse in time with your heartbeat. When your husband approached, you felt your body stiffen instinctively, your hands curling into fists without your permission. You closed your eyes, waiting for it to be over before it had even begun. A verified historical fact pierces the memory like a blade in Tudor England. If a marriage was not consummated, it could be annulled. This meant the household needed proof, and not just verbal confirmation. They wanted evidence, physical evidence. They needed to see the blood that marked your body as pure and promised legitimate heirs. If the sheets remained unstained, the blame fell on you, not on him, never on him. You could be accused of lying, of immorality, of sin. The consequences ranged from humiliation to annulment to violence. Your fringe detail comes next, whispering like a ghost in your ear. In some Tudor communities, it was customary for witnesses to sit outside the marriage chamber door, listening for signs of consummation. They would wait in silence, their ears pressed to the wood, hoping to hear movement or moans or any noise that indicated the ritual had occurred. Imagine the pressure of knowing an entire room of people had paused their evening to listen for the sound of your pain. You can still feel that pressure now, even though your wedding night is long past. You feel it when the man in your home sets his cup aside and looks at you with that mixture of expectation and ownership. You feel it when you smooth the sheets, preparing the bed not for rest but for another ritual of obligation. You feel it in the way your stomach clenches, the way your breathing becomes shallow, the way your hands tremble slightly even as you try to steady them. The room darkens further as the fire settles into its last faintest glow. The shadows lengthen, reaching toward you like fingers, and the air grows cooler. You can hear the faint sounds of the outside world, wind rustling through the thatch, a distant dog barking, a cartwheel rattling over uneven stones. But inside, everything feels still, heavy, waiting. You move to adjust the blankets, pulling them into place with slow, deliberate movements. Your husband watches you from across the room, his expression unreadable in the dim light. When he finally stands and walks toward you, the floorboards creak under his weight. You feel your pulse quicken, your body tensing with the instinctive knowledge of what is about to happen. He reaches out and touches your arm, his fingers warm and rough. The contact sends a ripple through your chest, not of desire but of resignation. You look up at him, trying to read something gentle in his face, something human, something that might remind you that he, too, is shaped by a world that never taught him how to consider your feelings. But what you see instead is expectation, duty, habit, a man raised to believe that his wants are needs and your body is an extension of his rights. You swallow hard, trying to breathe steadily. The moment stretches, becoming too long, too quiet. Then he leans in, his breath warm against your cheek, and the air between you collapses. You lie back on the bed, the ropes beneath the mattress creaking in protest. The straw shifts, releasing a faint musty smell. The sheets scratch your skin as you lower yourself into them, their texture reminding you of every ritual, every demand, every violation that has been expected of you since childhood. You close your eyes because it is easier than watching him undress, easier than seeing the hunger in his expression, easier than facing the reality that your body was never your own. His weight settles over you, heavy and unyielding. The darkness closes in, the fire flickers one last time before surrendering to the night. And as your mind drifts somewhere far away, suspended between waking and dreaming, you understand with crushing clarity that in Tudor England, virginity is not something a woman possesses. It is something taken from her, displayed, judged, and used against her. It is a cage she lives in long after the lock has been broken. You breathe, you wait, you endure. When morning finally arrives, you feel it not as light or warmth, but as a slow lifting of the night's suffocating pressure. You open your eyes to the faint grey glow creeping through the shutters, illuminating the room just enough for you to see the tangled heap of blankets beside you, where the man still sleeps, his back rising and falling in steady rhythm. Your body aches in the familiar ways, a dull throb that lingers in your hips, your lower back, your thighs. You try not to think about it. You try not to think about anything at all. You inhale the stale, smoky air and let it settle in your chest, telling yourself that the day has begun and you must begin with it. You shift slowly, careful not to wake him yet, and slide your feet to the floor. The cold earth kisses your toes harshly, the kind of cold that travels up your legs like a warning. You wrap your shawl around your shoulders and rise from the bed, feeling the mattress sigh beneath the loss of your weight. The straw inside rustles with that familiar whisper, a sound that reminds you there is no such thing as true rest here. You move through the room quietly, stepping over the bodies of children or siblings or house servants still curled under thin blankets, each one shivering slightly in the morning chill. The fire has gone out entirely. Only a few faint sparks glow beneath the ash, barely alive. You crouch down and stir them gently, coaxing the last warmth from their embers before adding a small handful of kindling. The wood crackles reluctantly, its breath slow to return. The smoke rises in a thin line, filling the air with its scratchy presence. You cough softly and wipe the corner of your mouth with your sleeve, feeling the grit of soot against your skin. And then, as you straighten, you see it. The small movement on your ankle, the unmistakable flicker of something alive inside your stocking. You slap your leg instinctively and feel the tiny crunch beneath your fingertips. A sensation you know too well by now. Flea, maybe two, maybe more. It is impossible to know. They thrive here, in the bedding, in the straw, in the seams of your clothes, in the folds of the blankets. They thrive because the environment nourishes them. Warm bodies, damp fabric, close quarters, and above all, the quiet surrender of people too tired to fight them. You sigh as you stand, brushing your skirt to shake out the straw dust and tiny black specks that cling to the fabric. There is no fabric in Tudor England that remains free of fleas for more than a few hours. Even if you beat your clothes in the yard until your arms ache, the creatures always return by nightfall. They feast on your blood while you sleep, leaving behind itchy red welts that burn throughout the day. You scratch them without thinking, nails catching skin in small absent-minded motions. Sometimes the welts bleed, sometimes they scab, sometimes they swell, but always they return. You step outside to fetch water, the bucket heavy in your hands as you descend the small wooden steps. The morning air is cold enough to sting your cheeks, but at least it smells fresher than the air inside the house. You breathe deeply, savoring the sensation of clean wind filling your lungs. It is a fleeting comfort, because the moment you near the water barrel or stream, the same familiar smells return: the dampness of moss, the faint metallic tang of river mud, the stale scent of wooden planks that have absorbed too many seasons of rain. You dip the ladle into the barrel, watching the surface ripple with those murky colors that never fully settle. You know the water is unsafe. Everyone knows, but it is all you have. You drink carefully, the cold liquid sliding down your throat, carrying with it the taste of wood, soil, and the faintest trace of algae. You swallow anyway. Hydration is more important than purity. And besides, it is not as though anyone in your era believes water should be clean. Clean water is a fantasy for saints and nobles. As you lift the bucket and begin your walk back, the wind picks up, rustling the thatch of the roof above your head. The sound is comforting in its own way, familiar and steady. You glance toward the horizon and see the faint outline of smoke rising from distant homes, each one a reminder that you are not alone in your discomfort. Everyone around you lives the same way, unwashed, cramped, infested, exhausted. The shared misery almost binds you all together in a strange, unspoken camaraderie. When you return inside, the man has begun to stir. He rubs his face with one rough hand, yawning loudly, his breath carrying the heavy scent of sleep, old ale, and decay. Morning breath in Tudor England is not a gentle thing. It is a weapon. You try to keep your distance as he sits up, but space is scarce and your retreat is limited. You set the bucket down near the hearth and begin preparing the morning meal, your movements efficient from years of repetition. He watches you for a moment, eyes half open before rising from the bed. As he stands, the straw in the mattress shifts again, releasing another faint puff of dust and that familiar, unpleasant smell of mold. He scratches his chest through his shirt, yawns once more, and moves toward the door to relieve himself outside. When he returns, you can smell the outdoors on him, the crisp morning breeze mixed with the unmistakable scent of fresh manure. It is impossible to separate these smells in this era. They simply layer upon one another until you no longer have the energy to distinguish them. You hand him a bowl of porridge, and he eats with the single-minded hunger of someone who labors with his body every day. Bits of grain cling to his beard, and you try not to stare. He is not trying to be unappealing. He is simply a man of his time. Bathing is rare. Grooming is minimal. Cleanliness is not a ritual but an occasional event. And yet, this is the man you are expected to share a bed with every night. This is the body expected to press against yours, to claim your warmth, to demand your submission. And every night, the fleas join you both. You sit across from him on the bench, eating your own portion of porridge. The heat of the bowl warms your hands, but you barely taste the food. Your mind is already drifting toward the night ahead. You know what will happen. You know that nothing in this day will change the expectations set upon you. The entire structure of Tudor society is built upon the assumption that married couples will share a bed, not just for warmth or companionship, but for reproduction. The continuation of family lines depends on it. The church encourages it. The law demands it. Yet the reality is far less romantic. Because once the sun sets and the room grows dark, you will lie down again on that straw-filled mattress, the ropes sagging beneath your combined weight, the fleas stirring in anticipation. You will feel them crawl along your legs, your stomach, your arms. You will scratch silently, trying not to wake the children nearby. You will lie still as the man beside you grows warm with expectation. And when he reaches for you, you will brace yourself once more for the discomfort, the heaviness, the intrusion, and the dull ache that follows. You stir your porridge absent-mindedly, your spoon scraping the inside of the wooden bowl. You try to focus on the sound of the fire crackling, the soft rustling of blankets as the children begin to stir, the distant caw of a crow outside, anything to distract you from the knot tightening in your stomach. A verified historical fact drifts into your thoughts like a cold draft. Tudor beds often housed not just fleas but lice, mites, and even bedbugs. These insects thrived in the warm climates created by human bodies and straw bedding. Reports from the era describe beds so infested that people could see insects crawling on the sheets as they lay down. Some families hung their bedding near the fire to drive the creatures out, but the relief was always temporary. Within hours the insects returned, hiding in the folds of fabric or burrowing into the straw. Your fringe detail slips in right behind it. Eerie and quietly horrifying, certain Tudor households sprinkled dried herbs like tansy or wormwood into their bedding, not just for scent, but because these herbs were believed to stun or kill fleas when heated by the warmth of bodies. The practice worked only partially. The herbs masked some of the smell and repelled some of the insects, but the fleas always returned, hungry and relentless. You think about these details as you set your empty bowl aside. You rub your hands together, trying to shake the chill out of them, but the cold is persistent. You breathe into your cupped palms, wishing for just a moment that anything about your life could feel clean or safe or warm in a way that lasted longer than a moment. The man stands and stretches, his back cracking audibly. He looks at you with that familiar combination of ownership and expectation, unaware of the storm inside your mind. You force a small smile. He nods, satisfied, and begins preparing for the day's labor. You watch him leave, the door closing behind him with a dull thud. The room falls quiet, save for the faint rustling of children waking. You feel a strange mixture of relief and dread. Relief because you have the day to yourself again. Dread because night will always return. You carry the empty bowls to the basin and begin washing them with cold water, your fingers numbing quickly. The water runs down your wrists, dripping onto your skirt, leaving dark stains that will dry slowly over the next hour. As you scrub the bowls, you feel something crawling on your neck. You slap it gently but firmly, catching another flea between your fingers. You flick it into the fire, listening to the faint hiss as it burns. 1 down, 100 to go. You continue washing the bowls, your movements slow and deliberate, your mind drifting once more to the ever-present reality of your life. You imagine a world where cleanliness is normal, where privacy exists, where intimacy is a choice rather than an expectation, where you can lie down at night without bracing yourself, a world where your body is your own. The cold afternoon settles into the house with the kind of heaviness that feels almost physical. You work through your tasks mechanically, moving one step at a time the way people in Tudor England must do when there is never a moment to sit without another chore rising up to fill the silence. You sweep the floor, though you know it will not stay clear for long because each footstep drags in more dirt, more straw, more debris from outside. You lift the pot to check the stew, and the mixture of cabbage, onions, and whatever scraps were left from yesterday produces a thick and sour smell that blends with the smoke from the fire and the stale breath of the room. Everything feels layered, as though the air has been collecting odors for years and refuses to let any of them escape. You wipe your nose instinctively, even though it never helps. The scent of smoke and sweat has settled into the very fibers of your camise, and you know you will carry it with you long after the fire dies. By the time the man of the house returns, your muscles ache with the dull, persistent fatigue that comes from constant labor. He steps inside, bringing a rush of cold air that momentarily freshens the room before being overtaken again by the heat of the fire and the lingering smells of the day. His presence is unmistakable, not just because of his size, but because of the way the scent of his work clings to him. Sweat soaked deeply into his wool tunic, old dirt embedded into the seams, the metallic scent of iron tools rubbed into his hands, and the sour aroma of ale from earlier that morning all combine into a smell that announces him before he speaks a word. In Tudor England, no one has the luxury of deodorants or clean clothing, so the odors of labor become part of the household landscape in a way that is impossible to ignore. You watch him remove his boots and see the mud flake off in pieces, scattering across the floor you just swept. You do not say anything. There is no point. This is how the rhythm of the house works. You clean, and the world undoes your work, and then you clean again. His hair is flattened against his forehead from sweat, and as he pushes it back, you notice how the grime has darkened the roots. You can see streaks of dirt on his neck, where the collar of his tunic rubbed against his skin during the day. You feel a brief instinctive urge to look away, not out of disgust but out of resignation, because you know you will be expected to lie beside this man tonight, and the proximity will offer no escape from the scents and textures of his unwashed body. You hand him his evening drink, and he takes it with a heavy sigh, resting his weight against the bench. He drinks in large gulps that make his throat move conspicuously, and each exhale carries a new wave of ale-laced breath into the air between you. You try to breathe through your mouth without making it obvious. The smell is something you have grown used to over time, but familiarity does not make it pleasant. It simply makes it expected. The lack of access to clean water means nobody cleans their teeth more than occasionally, and most people live with chronic gum infections, rot, or missing teeth, which adds another layer to the atmosphere of the household. As he finishes his drink, he wipes his mouth with the back of his hand, leaving a smear of moisture across his sleeve that blends seamlessly into the stains from earlier days. He starts talking about his work, his words slower now that he is tired, and you nod politely, listening even though your mind is wandering. You think about the ache in your lower back, the soreness in your shoulders, and the scratches on your wrists from carrying firewood earlier. You think about the heaviness in your stomach that has been building for hours, not because of the food, but because of what you know is coming once the sun fully sets. Intimacy is not something you have the freedom to anticipate or avoid. It simply happens because the expectations of the time demand it. You move toward the hearth again, pretending to arrange the contents of the pot even though it has not changed. You only need a moment to yourself, a breath of space inside a life where space rarely exists. The fire crackles weakly, struggling to maintain its strength as the last of the wood burns down into embers. The heat radiates unevenly, warming your face while the rest of your body remains chilled. You touch your cheek, feeling the contrast between the warm skin and the cold tip of your nose, and you tell yourself to focus on the small sensations rather than the growing pressure inside your chest. Behind you, you hear him rise. His footsteps are slow, heavy, and unmistakable. You know the sound, now the same way you know the sound of rain on the roof or wind pushing against the shutters. His presence fills the room before he even reaches you, and you feel his eyes on your back as he approaches. You straighten automatically, your body reacting out of habit rather than thought. When the warmth of his hand settles on your shoulder, it feels intrusive despite its softness. His palm is rough from years of labor, and the faint moisture from his sweat seeps through the fabric of your camise. You turn slightly because you must, because avoiding him would raise questions that you do not have the power to answer safely. His face is close enough now that you can see the details of his skin, the pores clogged with dirt, the small cuts on his chin, the uneven texture caused by years of sun and wind and hard living. His breath carries the warmth of ale and something else you cannot name. You inhale through your nose slowly, trying to control your reaction, but the room feels too tight for comfort. He moves his hand from your shoulder to your waist, guiding you with a familiarity that has nothing to do with affection and everything to do with possession. He is not cruel, he is not violent, but he is a man shaped entirely by a society that tells him your body is his right. Your consent is not part of the expectation. Your comfort is not considered. Your feelings are irrelevant. The culture you were born into has already decided your fate long before you reached this age. A verified historical fact settles sharply into your thoughts, an echo of the reality that governs every part of this moment in Tudor England. Once a woman was married, she had no legal right to refuse her husband's sexual advances. Refusal was considered a breach of marital duty, and the church encouraged wives to submit to their husbands to maintain harmony within the household. A woman's body was viewed as part of the marriage contract, belonging to her husband in the same way her labor, her property, and her obedience did. The word consent did not exist in any legal or moral framework in the way it does today. Your silence was expected. Your participation was assumed. Right behind this memory comes the fringe detail that chills you even further. Some women were advised that showing too much movement or sound during intimacy could be interpreted as immodesty or even sinful indulgence. Female desire was considered dangerous, linked to moral weakness or witchcraft, and many women were encouraged to remain quiet and still to preserve their virtue. This created a world in which physical closeness became an act stripped of personal expression, reduced to a ritual of duty rather than something shared or chosen. As he steps even closer, you feel the heat of his body permeating the air between you. He murmurs something about the lateness of the hour, his voice carrying the slow drawl of fatigue mixed with expectation. You do not argue. There is nothing to argue. His wants are not requests. They are inevitabilities built into the structure of daily life. You allow him to guide you toward the bed, each step tightening the knot in your stomach a little more. The shadows in the room deepen as the fire shrinks, and the bed appears like a dark shape waiting to swallow you. Its ropes sagging, the straw inside shifting with the familiar sound of friction and tiny insect movement. You lie down because you must. The straw pricks your back through the thin layer of your camise, and you can feel a few hard pieces pressing against your shoulder blades. The sheet scratches your thighs as you pull it over yourself, the coarse fibers reminding you again that even your bedding is designed for utility, not comfort. As he lowers himself beside you, the flea bites from the last few nights itch along your legs. You scratch instinctively, but the relief is minimal and temporary. The insects live in the bedding now, and their presence is as routine as the sound of the fire crackling or the children breathing in their sleep. He pulls the blanket higher and shifts closer, his arms sliding around you with the weight of a man who has worked all day. The room grows warmer from your combined body heat, amplifying the smell of sweat and old ale that clings to him. You close your eyes, letting your mind drift away, focusing instead on the distant sounds outside, the faint call of an owl, the creaking of the house settling in the cold, the occasional gust of wind. You imagine yourself somewhere else, somewhere where your body belongs only to you, where intimacy is something chosen rather than expected. But imagining does not change the reality. His hands find your waist, your hips, your thighs, and you brace yourself the way you have learned to do over countless nights. Your breath becomes shallow, your pulse quickens, and your muscles tense without your permission. You do not protest. You do not resist. The culture has trained you well in silence, in endurance, in the art of retreating mentally, while your body remains trapped in place. You feel the familiar pressure of his weight, the rhythm of his breathing against your neck, the roughness of his hands, and you let your mind wander far beyond the confines of the room, because that is the only refuge you have. Eventually it ends. It always ends, though the time it takes can feel distorted, stretched, or compressed by your detachment. He rolls away, exhaling deeply in the way men do when they believe they have fulfilled a marital duty. You lie still, your legs sore, your skin warm where his body had been pressed against yours, the sheet clinging to the sweat on your thighs. You pull the blanket up and shift onto your side, curling your knees slightly toward your chest. Your fingers brush against the raised welts left by flea bites, and you scratch them lightly, the sensation sharp and irritating but familiar. He falls asleep quickly, his breathing deepening into a steady rhythm that fills the quiet of the room. You remain awake, staring into the dim glow of the dying fire, your thoughts drifting through the heavy landscape of your life. You think about the meaning of marriage in your era, about the absence of choice, about the relentless demands placed upon your body. You think about how different things might have been if you lived in another time, a time where autonomy existed, where desire mattered, where intimacy was a shared experience rather than an obligation. But those thoughts feel distant, like imagining a world that exists only in stories. In Tudor England, you survive by accepting what you cannot change. You breathe through the discomfort, through the ache, through the loneliness that settles into your bones like a second skeleton. And eventually, as your eyelids grow heavy from exhaustion, you drift into sleep, knowing that tomorrow the cycle will begin again, the labor, the dirt, the fleas, the expectations, the silence. In this era, endurance is the closest thing you have to freedom. The next morning arrives with the same heavy air you have grown used to, the kind that settles low in the chest, and makes every breath feel like it must pass through layers of smoke, sweat, and the lingering residue of yesterday's chores. You open your eyes slowly, aware of the dull ache in your hips and the stiffness in your lower back, sensations that seem to have become permanent companions. The man beside you shifts in his sleep, his arm draped across the blanket in a way that suggests he has already forgotten the closeness of last night. You wait a moment before sliding yourself carefully off the bed, the straw inside the mattress rustling quietly beneath your weight. The faint movement sends a ripple through the bedding that disturbs the fleas, and you feel that familiar crawling sensation along your calf. You brush at your skin instinctively, knowing it is pointless, but the gesture makes you feel slightly more in control of your own body. You stand and wrap the shawl around your shoulders, the wool scratchy but necessary against the morning chill. Your breath hangs faintly in the air as you move toward the hearth, stepping over the small forms of sleeping children or siblings curled tightly under threadbare blankets. The fire has died to a thin line of embers, glowing like dying coals swallowed in ash. You crouch and stir them carefully, feeling the warmth rise in weak, uneven waves. You add a few pieces of wood, watching the flames struggle before finally catching with a soft crackle. The smell of smoke drifts through the room, merging seamlessly with the other scents that never truly disappear. As the fire begins to grow, you straighten and feel a slight pull in your stomach. You recognize the sensation instantly. It is the familiar twisting pressure that has been more frequent lately. A reminder that your body is not entirely yours. There is a possibility forming beneath your thoughts, something you do not want to name. Your hands instinctively rest on your lower abdomen, pressing lightly as if you might confirm or deny the fear by touch alone. You take a slow breath and push the thought aside. There is work to be done, and dwelling on possibilities will not change anything. You move toward the door, lifting the water bucket with both hands. The wooden handle presses into your palms, already tender from the friction of yesterday's tasks. You step outside into the cold air, which feels sharper than usual, carrying the faint scent of smoke from neighboring houses and the earthy smell of damp leaves strewn across the ground. The sky above is washed in pale grey, the kind of colour that gives no hint of the day to come. You hurry across the yard, the ground uneven beneath your feet, and reach the water barrel. The surface of the water is thinly iced over, and you dip your ladle through the crust, watching it break into shards that drift like small pieces of cloudy glass. As you fill the bucket, you think about what the church teaches regarding desire, temptation, and the body. You remember sermons given by priests who spoke in heavy, solemn tones about the dangers of lust, the sinfulness of pleasure, and the holy duty of marital relations stripped of personal indulgence. You were taught that your body is a vessel for obedience, that desire is a weakness, that the natural instincts of the flesh must be smothered beneath layers of discipline and silence. You were told that a virtuous woman shows no appetite, not even a flicker of interest, because curiosity is the first step toward corruption. These teachings were delivered with such frequency and intensity that they settled into your mind like sediment, forming the foundation of your thoughts about yourself. You learned to associate your own body with shame, to view your impulses as dangerous, to suppress any spark of individuality that might draw attention. The idea of pleasure was never part of your education. The idea of choosing your partner was never part of your world. You grew up knowing that your duty was to maintain modesty at all costs, to remain silent during intimacy, to allow yourself to be acted upon rather than participating openly. It is control disguised as virtue. You lift the bucket carefully and begin the walk back toward the house, your arms straining under the weight. The cold air stings your cheeks, causing your eyes to water slightly. The smell of the morning begins to shift as families start their day. The scents of manure, wood smoke, damp straw, and human activity blending into the sensory landscape you have learned to navigate without flinching. You enter the house again, letting the door close behind you with a soft thud. The warmth from the hearth has grown, filling the room with a thin veil of steam that carries the smell of the burning wood. You set the bucket down beside the hearth and begin preparing the morning meal. The sound of stirring porridge becomes a kind of metronome, helping you focus on the immediate task rather than the growing unease in your mind. The man wakes eventually, sitting up with a grunt that sounds halfway between exhaustion and irritation. His hair is flattened against one side of his head, and his eyes are bleary from sleep. He stretches with a loud groan, the sound rough and unrefined, and you smell the familiar mixture of stale ale, sweat, and old wood smoke drifting toward you. It is a scent that has become part of the daily smellscape of your life, unavoidable and constant. He comes to the table and sits heavily, rubbing his face with both hands before reaching for the cup you place in front of him. As he drinks, you watch the morning light gradually spread across the room, illuminating the worn edges of the furniture and the patches of peeling plaster on the walls. You feel a faint tremor inside your chest, something between fatigue and anxiety, and you remind yourself to breathe deeply, steadily. The man finishes his drink and begins to speak about his plans for the day, his voice low and steady. You nod at the appropriate moments, offering simple replies when necessary, though your mind is drifting again toward the thought you keep trying to suppress. When he leaves for work, the room grows quieter, though not peaceful. The constant hum of responsibilities begins immediately. You wash the bowls with cold water that numbs your fingers, scrub the wooden handles of the utensils, sweep the floor, and shake out the blankets near the doorway. Each movement sends a faint cloud of dust into the air, catching the morning light in soft streaks. You pull the bedding toward the window, hoping the sunlight might at least dry the dampness that has gathered in the straw from the humid night. The sheets carry the unmistakable scent of sweat and old smoke, and as you lift them, a wave of warmth escapes that makes you grimace. There is no way to truly clean them. Laundering linens requires boiling water and large quantities of fuel, both of which are too precious to waste except on rare occasions. You take one corner of the sheet and shake it outside. Fleas scatter in tiny black arcs, some leaping onto your arms before you brush them away. You sigh as you continue the work, knowing that shaking the bedding will only reduce the infestation temporarily. They always return. Fleas thrive in warmth and fabric, and Tudor households provide both in abundance. There is no escape. Even wealthier homes suffer from them, though the rich at least have access to perfumes and herb sachets to mask the discomfort. As the day progresses, the routine absorbs you. You chop vegetables, mend worn fabric, feed the animals if you have any, and tend the fire. At some point you sit to rest for a brief moment, and your mind drifts again toward the teachings that dominated your youth. You recall the emphasis the church placed on self-control and punishment, the fixation on rooting out temptation, the elaborate rules concerning even the simplest forms of pleasure. Priests warned often about the dangers of lust, preaching that desire could lead a woman astray, that her curiosity could summon sin, that her body could become an instrument of the devil if left unchecked. You were told to guard your thoughts, to suppress natural impulses, to consider your duty as both sacred and inescapable. Even now, when you think about intimacy, you feel a strange mixture of discomfort and resignation. You were never taught how to interpret your own feelings, how to understand your body as something with autonomy. Instead, you learned to view it as a vessel for someone else's wants, someone else's rights, someone else's lineage. The Church's warnings about female desire were delivered with such gravity that even the idea of wanting something for yourself feels like a transgression. It has shaped you, defined you, and limited you in ways you cannot fully articulate. Your thoughts linger on a verified historical fact. The Church in Tudor England explicitly taught that sex was primarily for reproduction, not pleasure. Any act that was not aimed at producing children was considered suspect or sinful. Marital intimacy was framed as a duty owed to the husband, and pleasure outside of reproduction was discouraged, especially for women. The language of sermons and confessions constantly reinforced this ideology, leaving little room for personal agency or emotional connection. A fringe detail follows with its own unsettling weight. Certain Tudor medical texts claim that excessive female pleasure could cause physical harm, such as weakening the womb or corrupting the humors. Women were advised to remain passive for their own health, further reinforcing a culture where silence and stillness were misinterpreted as virtue. These ideas shaped not only personal behavior, but the expectations that governed entire communities. As the afternoon deepens, you continue your tasks, trying to focus on the immediate work rather than the strange tension growing in your chest. The man returns earlier than expected, his boots leaving a trail of mud across the floor that you will have to sweep yet again. He moves toward you with the same mixture of weariness and entitlement you have learned to anticipate. His presence fills the room once more, and he greets you with a touch that feels more like a reminder than affection. Your body tenses instinctively. You try to hide the reaction, but he notices the stiffness in your shoulders and tilts his head, confused by the distance you are trying to create. You murmur something about being tired, about the heavy workload, about the fire needing tending. He nods, though his eyes linger on you with a weight that feels familiar and suffocating. You know that tonight will follow the same pattern as every other night. Expectation, obligation, the slow collapse of any space you might try to carve out for yourself. As the sun begins to set, the room grows dimmer, the corners filling with shadows that stretch toward the center like silent observers. You arrange the bedding again, knowing the insects inside will be active soon. You scratch a bite on your wrist and feel the sting intensify. The man moves around the room with slow steps, preparing for rest, unaware of the storm gathering inside you. When he reaches for you later, you will comply, because compliance is what you were taught. Compliance is what the culture demands. You feel the first faint shift inside your body weeks before you admit it to yourself. It begins with small changes, almost imperceptible at first, the kind that could be explained by fatigue or stress or the relentless cycle of daily labor. Your stomach feels unsettled in the mornings, twisting gently as though something inside is waking before you do. Your chest feels heavier, your breathing slightly more shallow, and you find yourself pausing more often when bending or lifting. At first you tell yourself it is nothing, a passing sickness, a moment of imbalance caused by the winter air or by the meager portions of food you have been living on lately. But deep down you know the truth. Tudor women always know. The body begins to speak long before the mind is ready to listen. When you step outside to fetch water one early morning, the ground slick with frost, a sudden wave of dizziness sweeps through you so abruptly that you must grab the edge of the doorway to steady yourself. The cold air rushes into your lungs, sharp and metallic, but it brings no relief. Your vision dims for a moment, narrowing as though the world is closing in around you. You breathe slowly until the dizziness fades, but by then your suspicion has already hardened into certainty. You stand there for a long moment, the bucket hanging from your hand, the morning air thick with the scent of damp earth and wood smoke, and you feel the full weight of what is happening inside you. You whisper nothing aloud, but the silence around you seems to echo with the truth you do not want to face. You carry the water back inside and continue your chores, but every movement feels heavier, more meaningful, as though each step is aligned with invisible threads that pull you toward a future you cannot control. In Tudor England, pregnancy is not a blessing so much as a gamble, and every woman knows it. You have seen the way it transforms the faces of wives and daughters, the way their bodies change, swell, and strain under the burden of creating new life. You have seen the fear in their eyes, the trembling in their hands as they rub their stomachs, unsure whether they will survive the months ahead. No woman is safe, not even the wealthiest. Death does not discriminate here. It slips into bedchambers without hesitation, and childbirth is the door it most often chooses. As the days pass, your symptoms grow stronger, your stomach churns more frequently, and your appetite shifts unpredictably, sometimes vanishing entirely and sometimes roaring with sudden demands. The smell of certain foods makes your throat tighten. When you lean forward to tend the fire, a sharp tug pulls across your abdomen. You move more slowly, more carefully, trying not to draw attention to yourself. The man notices your quietness, but attributes it to fatigue. He says nothing. He does not ask questions. In Tudor society, a woman's body is assumed to function according to its purpose, and that purpose is reproduction. The moment a wife begins to show signs of pregnancy, the community accepts it without ceremony. They expect it. They rely on it. Your body becomes a vessel for the continuation of the household line, a responsibility that has nothing to do with your desires or fears. You spend your days trying to hide your discomfort as best you can. You knead dough, chop vegetables, scrub linens that will never truly become clean, and bend to pick up fallen scraps from the floor. But each task feels harder than before, your breath catching in your throat more quickly, your lower back tightening in a way that warns of the months to come. Your hands tremble when you carry heavy pots, and sometimes you must stop completely, leaning against the wall to wait for the dizziness to pass. When this happens, you feel a cold rush of terror because you know you cannot afford weakness. There is no physician waiting to assist you. There is no access to safe medical care. The only people who might help you are midwives whose skills vary from experienced to questionable, and their knowledge is shaped by superstition as much as by experience. You think about the women you have known who have suffered through childbirth. Some survived, though not without scars. Others did not. You remember one neighbor whose labor lasted 3 full days, her screams echoing through the village, even as the priest stood outside her door praying. When she finally passed, the midwife emerged with shaking hands, her apron stained with blood. The parish bell tolled before sunrise the next morning. Another woman you knew survived childbirth, only to die 12 days later from fever, her body trembling violently as her skin flushed red. The priest murmuring prayers at her bedside while her husband held their newborn child. No one understood the infection raging inside her. No one had the power to treat it. The midwife blamed bad humors. The priest blamed sin. The family blamed nothing at all because they had no vocabulary for the grief that had been handed to them. In the quiet moments of the afternoon, when the house is warm and dim and your body feels heavy with exhaustion, you press your palm against your stomach and feel a strange duality, a sense of awe mixed with dread. Life is growing inside you. But in Tudor England, life and death share the same room. You know the statistics, even if no one speaks them aloud. Women die from childbirth all the time. It is so common that people barely flinch when they hear the news. They simply nod solemnly and say it was God's will. And you wonder how many of those women felt this same fear, this same awareness, this same quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, they would be one of the lucky ones. As the months progress, your body begins to show unmistakable signs of pregnancy. Your belly swells, your breasts grow tender and heavy, and your hips widen in preparation for the inevitable. You walk differently now, your center of gravity shifting, your gait slower. You notice the way people look at you. some with sympathy, others with expectation, and a few with envy if they have struggled to conceive. The man is proud, though not in a way that comforts you. He sees your pregnancy as proof of his virility, as evidence that the household will continue through legitimate heirs. He places a hand on your stomach sometimes, not gently but with the assertive weight of ownership, and you force yourself to remain still, even though the pressure makes your skin crawl. You do not tell him that certain touches send a jolt of pain through your abdomen. You do not tell him that your back throbs constantly, especially at night. The culture teaches wives to be silent in their suffering. The verified historical fact that lingers in your mind is that Tudor women often gave birth on their knees or squatting, using gravity to assist labor because it was less strenuous than lying flat. Midwives encouraged these positions because they aligned with older traditions, but in wealthier homes, male physicians insisted on the woman lying on her back, a position they preferred because it allowed them to observe and manage the birth, even though it made labor more dangerous. Women were often forced to conform to these medical trends despite the risks. You think about this often, the way your body's safety is entrusted to the preferences of others. The fringe detail that follows is even stranger. Some Tudor households believed that placing a warm loaf of bread beneath a woman's feet during labor could draw out evil spirits that caused difficult deliveries. Others placed iron tools beneath the bed to ward off witches who might steal the baby or curse the birth. These rituals were taken seriously, and families often gathered charms and relics in preparation for labor, hoping to protect both mother and child from supernatural harm. It is unsettling to realize that in an era without reliable medicine, people often leaned more on superstition than on practical knowledge. As your belly grows heavier, sleep becomes more difficult. You lie on the straw mattress at night, your legs aching, your hips throbbing, your back burning with the strain of supporting your expanding body. The fleas, which have been relentless since the start of the pregnancy, seem to sense your growing vulnerability. Their bites burn more intensely, leaving swollen welts that sting and itch for hours. You scratch them until the skin breaks, leaving thin lines of blood along your thighs and ankles. You wake often during the night, gasping for breath, your heart racing as though you have been startled by some invisible threat. The darkness feels heavier now, the shadows in the corners deeper, and every creak of the house sounds like a warning. You begin to prepare for the birth in the only ways available to you. You gather linens, though you know you do not have nearly enough. You boil water when you can, though it cools quickly in the drafty room. You speak quietly with the midwife in the village, a woman whose hands are steady but whose knowledge is incomplete. She gives you herbs to soothe your stomach, though the bitterness makes you gag. She tells you stories of births she has attended, some successful, some tragic, and each one adds another layer to the quiet fear building in your chest. You nod when she speaks, but inside your thoughts churn with the awareness that your fate may depend on factors beyond your control. When the first pains finally come, they arrive not as a gentle warning, but as a sharp, twisting grip that pulls you from sleep and forces a gasp from your throat. You sit up, clutching your abdomen, feeling the muscles contract with an intensity that steals your breath. The man wakes beside you, confused at first, then alert. He calls for someone to fetch the midwife. You try to stand, but another wave of pain hits you, sharper than the first, bending you forward. Your hands grip the edge of the bed, nails digging into the wood. You breathe through clenched teeth, trying to steady yourself as sweat beads on your forehead despite the cold. The midwife arrives quickly, her face serious, her hands already preparing the materials she needs. She helps you to your feet and guides you toward the stool or the bed, depending on her judgment. The contractions come faster now, each one gripping your body with a force that feels almost inhuman. You feel pressure building inside you, a heaviness that makes it difficult to breathe. The midwife murmurs instructions, her voice calm though her eyes flicker with concern. She tells you to push, to breathe, to hold, to wait, her commands blending into the haze of pain that now dominates your world. Hours pass. Maybe more. Time collapses into a series of contractions so intense that they drown out everything else. The sounds of the house, the murmurs of the midwife, even your own thoughts. You grip the edges of the stool until your knuckles turn white. You scream despite yourself, the pain ripping through your body with a violence you did not know was possible. You feel your skin stretch, tear, burn. You feel warmth flood between your legs, and for a moment you are certain you are dying. The midwife works quickly, her hands steady, her voice urging you forward. She tells you she can see the baby's head. You push with everything you have, your vision darkening at the edges, your heart pounding wildly. You feel something shift inside you, a tearing, a release, a moment of unbearable pressure, followed by the sudden sensation of emptiness. A cry pierces the air. The midwife lifts the child, her face a mixture of relief and urgency. You slump back, shaking, your body trembling uncontrollably. Blood pools beneath you more than you expected, and a wave of cold fear washes over you. The midwife presses cloths against your body, murmuring prayers under her breath. You hear her voice as though from a distance. She tells you to stay awake. She tells you to breathe. She tells you that you must deliver the afterbirth. You do, with difficulty, pain, and more blood. You feel faint. You feel cold. You feel your strength slipping away. You wonder if this is the end. In Tudor England, it often is. Whether you survive the next minutes, hours, or days depends on luck more than anything else. Luck, and the will of a body that has been pushed beyond its limits. The days after childbirth unfold in a slow, disorienting haze that feels almost separate from time itself, as though you have been placed in a dim and narrow corridor where the hours do not behave the way they once did. You wake without knowing when you fell asleep, and you drift back into unconsciousness without knowing how long you were awake, your body trapped in a cycle of pain, fever, cold sweats, and exhausted trembling. The midwife visits often, sometimes twice in a day, her presence a steady figure in the shifting fog of your mind. She measures your temperature with the back of her hand against your forehead, checks the bleeding that still concerns her, and murmurs short reassurances that do not reach you fully because your thoughts move too slowly to keep pace. You sense her concern even when she tries to hide it, and each time she steps away from the bed, you feel the old fear coil again inside your chest, a fear that has not left you since the moment you collapsed after the birth. The room itself feels altered, as though something heavy has settled over it that cannot be swept away or aired out. The walls seem closer, the air thicker, and the fire sounds louder than usual, its crackling sometimes sharp enough to make you flinch. The faint smell of blood hangs in the space despite your attempts to wash the linens. No matter how many times the cloth is rinsed or how much steam rises from the basin, the coppery scent clings stubbornly to the fibers, mixing with the damp musk of the mattress and the smoke that seeps into everything. You try not to think about it too much, because each time the smell reaches you, it reminds you of how close you came to vanishing. Your body feels unfamiliar now, changed in ways that make simple movements into careful negotiations. Your abdomen remains sore and swollen, tender to the touch, and each attempt to sit up sends a sharp tug through your lower belly. Your thighs ache from the strain of labor. Your back throbs with a deep, gnawing pain that flares whenever you shift position, and the rawness between your legs forces you to move slowly, deliberately, as though you might break something inside yourself if you rush. The midwife warned you that it will take weeks before your body resembles what it once was, but she did not say whether you will ever feel like yourself again. You suspect she does not know. You press your palm against your stomach one morning, feeling the empty space where the weight of the child once rested, and the sensation brings an unexpected wave of emotion that you cannot immediately name. It is not sadness exactly, nor is it relief. It is something more complicated, a mixture of grief for what your body endured and fear for what it may be forced to endure again. In Tudor England, surviving childbirth does not grant you rest or guarantee safety. It simply resets the cycle. Women are expected to become pregnant repeatedly, often with little time to heal between one birth and the next. The man will expect more children. The community will expect more children. The church will praise you for each one and scold you if you attempt to avoid them. Your body is not your own. It is a shared resource, a communal expectation, a vessel for lineage rather than a home for your own identity. When you hold the newborn against your chest, you feel a different kind of weight, a fragile, trembling warmth that makes your hands soften and your heart tighten. The child's small breaths brush against your skin, and the tiny fingers curl instinctively around your thumb. For a moment the world narrows to just the two of you, and everything else fades into the background. But even as you look at the infant's face, you cannot escape the knowledge that their survival is far from guaranteed. Infancy in Tudor England is a precarious journey, and you have seen far too many mothers bury their children before they learn to walk or speak. You kiss the child's forehead because you do not know how long you will have them, and you hold them close because the world outside your arms is full of dangers. The verified historical fact that lingers in your thoughts is that nearly 1 in 3 children in Tudor England died before the age of 5. Illness was constant, sanitation non-existent, and even minor infections could become fatal. Parents mourned with devastating frequency, their grief woven into the rhythm of their lives. You remember the funerals you witnessed as a child, the small wooden boxes lowered into the earth, the mothers standing silent with hollow faces while neighbors murmured prayers behind them. The memory makes your grip on your own infant tighten. The fringe detail that follows is equally unsettling. Some Tudor families believed that leaving a newborn unwatched for even a moment allowed evil spirits or fairies to steal the child and replace the infant with a changeling. Mothers were instructed to keep the baby close at all times, especially in the first weeks, and households often placed iron objects near the crib to ward off spirits. The belief was not fringe in the way modern people imagine. It was genuine, widespread, and rooted in the desperation of families who had no explanation for sudden illness or failure to thrive. The fear of losing a baby to unseen forces became a way to cope with the harsh reality that death often arrived without warning. You think about this when you hold your child through the long nights. Your exhaustion a heavy cloak around you. You remain awake even when your eyes burn with fatigue, afraid to drift off for too long, afraid that the faint rattling in the child's breath might grow into something worse if you let your guard down. The man sleeps deeply beside you, undisturbed by the newborn's restlessness. He does not hear the coughs or the cries, nor does he rise when the baby needs to be fed or rocked. The culture has taught him that these tasks belong to you alone. Even if he wished to help, he would not know how. Men in this era are not taught to cradle their children gently or sing to them softly. They are taught to provide labor, to enforce authority, and to expect obedience. The finer threads of caregiving are expected to be woven by women, even when those women can barely stand on their own feet after childbirth. The midwife warns you to be careful, to keep warm, to avoid drafts, and to stay away from cold water for at least a month. She tells you that your womb must close, and that your blood must settle, or you may fall prey to childbed fever. Childbed fever is a phrase everyone knows, but no one fully understands. You know only what you have seen. Women who seem to be healing well one day suddenly collapsing with fever. The next, their skin flushed, their bodies trembling violently, their minds drifting into delirium as the infection spreads. The fever is terrifyingly fast and often fatal. You think about this each time a chill creeps across your spine, each time you feel warmth gather in your cheeks, and each time you wake drenched in sweat. You tell yourself that the dampness is from the fire, or the blankets, or your own anxiety, but the fear persists, a whisper at the edge of every thought. Your movements become slow and calculated as you navigate the days, each step a reminder of how fragile your recovery is. You boil herbs when you can, though the midwife's mixtures are bitter and sometimes make you gag. You wash only minimally because cold water is believed to unbalance the humors. You eat small portions of food that you can keep down, even though your appetite shifts unpredictably. Sometimes you cannot stand the smell of cooking. Sometimes you crave food so intensely that you feel faint from need. But you cannot indulge yourself freely because food is scarce, and you must ration what the household has. The man watches you occasionally with a mixture of curiosity and impatience, as though unsure why your recovery is not faster. He does not understand the toll childbirth takes on a woman's body. Few men in this era do. You hear him speaking with neighbors outside one afternoon, and his voice carries through the thin walls. He tells them proudly that the child is healthy, and hints that more children will follow soon, his tone confident and unbothered. You feel your throat tighten at the thought of more pregnancies, more cycles of pain, more risks that may one day end your life. But you stay silent, because silence is the only protection available to you in a society that does not recognize your fears as legitimate. When you do manage to walk outside again, the cold air shocks your lungs and your legs tremble beneath you. You make it only a few steps before you must lean against the wall to catch your breath. The world feels larger and louder than it did before childbirth. Every sound seems sharper: the barking of dogs, the creaking of carts, the clatter of a nearby bucket, and every smell more overwhelming. The manure from the fields makes your stomach twist, the smoke from the chimneys stings your eyes, and the damp scent of the earth fills you with an inexplicable heaviness. You turn back toward the house quickly, the air pressing against you in a way that makes your heart race, and you realize how vulnerable you are now. Inside, you settle into a chair near the fire, cradling the baby against your chest. The warmth from the flames eases some of the tension in your back, but the fear remains. You know that even though the childbirth itself has passed, the danger is not over. Women's health in Tudor England is a fragile thing, maintained by chance and intuition rather than medical understanding. You try to remain vigilant, watching for signs of fever, for unusual bleeding, for dizziness that exceeds what might be expected. But you are exhausted, and vigilance becomes harder with each passing day. When the man approaches you in the evening, his hand brushing your shoulder or resting on your waist, you feel a different kind of tension spike through your body. You are not healed. You can barely walk without discomfort. The thought of intimacy terrifies you, not just because of the physical pain, but because of the possibility of another pregnancy before your body has even recovered from the last. But he does not see this fear. The culture has never taught him to look for it. In his world, a wife's duty is constant, and childbirth is merely an interruption to normal expectations. You murmur excuses when you can, leaning on the midwife's warnings that you must rest for at least a month. He accepts this for now, though you see the impatience gathering in his expression. You know that the reprieve is temporary. You know that in a few weeks, perhaps even days, the cycle will resume. The bed will once again become a place of obligation rather than rest. Your body will once again be expected to serve a role that brings you closer to danger each time. When night falls and the fire dims, you lie awake beside the newborn's cradle, listening to the small breaths that fill the silence. The baby shifts occasionally, letting out a soft cry that makes your heart clench with both tenderness and fear. You place a hand on the child's chest, feeling the rise and fall of each breath, and you whisper a silent plea into the darkness, for strength, for safety, for another day of survival in a world that offers neither comfort nor certainty. Your eyes remain open long after the man has fallen asleep, and as you stare at the shadows gathering in the corners of the room, you understand something with painful clarity. Childbirth may have spared you this time, but in Tudor England the danger never truly passes. Your body carries the marks of survival, but it also carries the expectation that you will face these dangers again and again until fate or exhaustion finally claims you. The weeks after childbirth settle into a new rhythm that does not feel like living so much as surviving inside a maze of obligations, discomforts, and unspoken expectations. The newborn's cries carve their way through every hour of the day and night, creating a soundscape that blends into the rest of Tudor life. The creak of the house's wooden frame shifting in the cold, the dull, half-muffled impact of boots on the packed earth outside, the constant whisper of smoke twisting its way through the rafters, and the persistent scratch of straw beneath the bedding. Sleep becomes a fragmented luxury, broken into moments rather than hours, and your body moves through each day with the sluggish heaviness of someone who has not fully recovered and may never fully recover. Your hands tremble more now than they did before the birth, not enough for others to notice, but enough that you feel the tremor inside the bones, a reminder that exhaustion has taken root in every part of you. You rise before dawn most mornings because the baby wakes, and you have no choice but to follow the rhythm of their needs. You sit near the hearth with the infant in your arms, letting the weak flame warm your face while the rest of your body remains wrapped in the chill of early morning. You sway gently, partly to soothe the child, and partly because the movement helps you stay awake. The fire crackles slowly, and the newborn's tiny breaths flutter against your chest. You look at their face in the dim light, red-cheeked, partially scrunched, still adjusting to the harsh world they have entered, and you are struck again by how fragile they seem. Their body feels impossibly light compared to the weight of the responsibility placed upon you. Their survival depends entirely on your ability to recover, to remain strong, to endure no matter how fragile you feel yourself. Your own body protests constantly. Each morning you wake with new soreness or stiffness, and sometimes you feel sharp pains inside your abdomen when you bend or reach too quickly. You try to hide the wince each time it happens because the man grows impatient with what he perceives as lingering frailty. He sees the chores, the cold, the food preparation, the cleaning, the washing, all the tasks of the household waiting to be done, and he assumes you can resume them all at full strength simply because the birth is behind you. The subtle impatience in his expression grows each time he sees you pause to catch your breath or hold your side as a cramp seizes you. He does not understand the internal wounds the birth left behind, the slow healing your body must fight for on its own, because no one has explained these realities to him. Men of this era are taught the mechanics of their work, the rules of inheritance, the obligations of marriage, but they are not taught the mechanics of a woman's body beyond the belief that it exists to produce heirs and serve the household. Your pain, unless it stops you from working entirely, exists in silence. You attempt to work slowly at first, easing your way into the chores, carrying smaller pieces of firewood, scrubbing the floor in shorter intervals, lifting pots with both hands even when one hand would have been enough before. You do all of this carefully, not because you want to be cautious, but because your body demands it. The midwife warned you that if you push too hard, you risk reopening internal tears or disrupting your womb's recovery. You heed her caution, but the man interprets your gentleness as laziness or indulgence. You overhear him muttering outside one afternoon about how women always make too much fuss over childbirth, how they have been doing it for centuries and should simply get on with their work. His ignorance stings not because he is uniquely cruel, but because he reflects the collective belief of your world. Your pain is not exceptional. It is expected. It is your duty to bear it without drawing attention. Each night, as you cradle the child and rock them to sleep, you feel the pressure of the man's gaze slowly shifting from patient tolerance to entitled anticipation. He does not say anything directly yet, but you have lived enough nights beside him to understand his rhythms, the way his silence can turn into expectation without a single word spoken. You feel the tension gathering in the air, thickening like the smoke from the hearth, building toward the inevitable moment when he believes it is reasonable to return to the marital bed the way things were before the birth. You fear that moment more than you feared the delivery itself, because the memory of the pain is too fresh, your body too torn, your wounds too raw. You think about how even walking to the water barrel sends a throbbing pulse through your pelvis, how lifting the baby sometimes makes your vision blur at the edges from the pressure inside your abdomen, and yet you know that very soon he will expect to enter your body again as though nothing significant has happened. The reality of consent in Tudor England hangs over you like a shadow. You know that once he decides the time has come, your reluctance will mean nothing. A wife's refusal does not exist as a valid concept. You can delay, you can distract, you can plead exhaustion or illness, but those excuses have a short lifespan. Someone in the community will eventually suggest that he must not let too much time pass. for the health of the marriage, for the satisfaction of his needs, for the continuation of the family, and he will listen to them because the opinions that uphold his desires always hold more weight than the fears you carry inside your chest. The newborn stirs in your arms with a soft cry, pulling you from your thoughts. You lift the child to your shoulder and pat their back gently, feeling the small ridges of ribs beneath your fingertips. Their warm breath brushes your collarbone, and you look down, studying their tiny ear, their closed eyes, their delicate skin mottled by the cold. You wonder if they will survive, not with morbid fascination but with the pragmatic understanding of your time. The knowledge that the child may not reach their first year does not steal your affection, instead it intensifies it, making every moment feel more urgent. Because you cannot escape the numbers. You cannot escape the stories whispered by mothers at the well or by midwives at the bedside. You know that children in Tudor England die more often than they live. Fever comes without warning. Coughs deepen overnight. Rashes spread uncontrollably. Milk spoils easily. Water sickens without taste or smell. Even teething can become deadly if infection sets in. You sleep beside the child with one ear always open, listening for any shift in their breathing, any sign of distress, any cough that lasts longer than it should. It is not paranoia, it is survival. Outside the house, life continues with its relentless pace. You hear neighbors calling to one another, arguing, laughing, cursing, their voices carrying through the thin walls. You hear carts passing by, chickens squawking, pigs rooting in the dirt. The world does not pause for your recovery. Winter approaches whether you are ready or not. You must gather herbs, salt what little meat you can obtain, patch the holes in your clothing, mend the hem of your camise, where it has frayed too thin from constant wear. The list of tasks grows longer each day, and your body does not grow stronger fast enough to keep up. On one particularly cold morning, you feel a sudden burn in your lower back while lifting a pot of water, a pain sharp enough to force you to grip the table to stay upright. The baby cries from the cradle, but you must wait for the pain to ebb before you can move again. A dull throb remains long after the initial flare. You breathe deeply, trying to steady yourself, and walk slowly to pick up the child. As you hold them, a thought you have been avoiding grows harder to silence. What if something inside you has shifted again? What if the healing the midwife spoke of has not gone correctly? What if the blood that still appears each morning and evening is not normal postpartum bleeding, but something more dangerous, something that might lead to fever or infection? You push the thought aside because there is nothing you can do. There is no doctor who will examine you without cost. And even if one did, his understanding of female anatomy would be limited by the misconceptions of the time. Physicians in Tudor England based their treatments on humour theory, not anatomy or physiology. They bleed patients for ailments that require rest, apply poultices that accomplish little, and prescribe harsh laxatives for conditions that demand nourishment. You trust the midwife more than any physician, but her knowledge too is shaped by inherited wisdom and belief rather than science. You depend entirely on luck. The verified historical fact you recall in this moment is that postpartum infections, what modern people call sepsis, were one of the leading causes of death for women. The lack of hygiene in childbirth, combined with the use of unwashed linens, unclean hands, and primitive instruments, meant that bacteria had endless opportunities to enter a woman's body. Once infection took hold, death could come swiftly, sometimes within a day, sometimes within a week. Midwives could do little more than offer herbs, prayers, and comfort. The fringe detail follows naturally in your thoughts. Some Tudor families believed that postpartum fever was caused by a woman's failure to purge her body of corrupted blood, leading them to promote dangerous practices to hasten bleeding, including the use of hot stones, tight bindings, or vigorous massage. These attempted cures often worsened the mother's condition and hastened her death. The idea that internal infection might be the cause did not exist yet. You think of these details often, not with scholarly curiosity but with the sharp edge of fear that cuts through your breath when a wave of dizziness overtakes you without warning. When the man eventually approaches you one evening, standing behind your chair with a familiar possessive stillness, your stomach tightens in anticipation. He places a hand on your shoulder, and the weight of it sends a ripple of tension through your body. He murmurs something about how long it has been, his tone intended to sound gentle, but carrying the underlying impatience you knew would arrive eventually. You do not look at him. Your gaze stays fixed on the fire, watching the logs collapse inward as the flames narrow to a thin glow. You tell him quietly that your body still hurts, that the midwife warned against intimacy too soon, that you fear reopening your wounds. He listens, but the expression on his face shifts with a frustrated edge. He does not raise his voice, but the disappointment radiates from him in a way that makes your chest tighten with dread. He will wait a few more days, perhaps even a week, but you know that your excuses are a dwindling resource. His patience has limits, shaped by a culture that prioritizes his needs over your pain. You know that once he decides the time has come, you will not have the luxury of refusal. The fear of that moment lingers over your days, casting a shadow even when you are rocking the baby, or washing the dishes or tending the fire. It shapes your movements, your thoughts, your attempts to rest. Relief is temporary. Safety is temporary. Pain is permanent. The baby begins to cry, and you lift them into your arms with slow, careful movements. Their small body fits perfectly against your chest, and as you hold them, you feel the faintest flicker of strength return, as though the simple connection between mother and child grants you a brief reprieve from the weight of everything else. You sway gently, humming under your breath, your voice low enough not to carry beyond your immediate surroundings. The child's cries soften, and you feel their tiny hands curl against your collarbone. You sit in the dim light of the fire, the man eventually settling onto the bed behind you, waiting for sleep to claim him. The house grows quiet except for the crackle of the hearth, and the occasional shifting of the mattress when he turns. You lay the baby down in their cradle, and trace a gentle hand across their cheek. You watch their breathing for a long time, counting each rise and fall of their chest as though the rhythm itself might anchor you. When you finally lie down on the mattress, the fleas stir instantly, their bites stinging your ankles, your calves, your stomach. You scratch lightly before pulling the blanket over yourself, your body curling instinctively away from the man's side of the bed. You close your eyes, though sleep does not come easily. Your mind remains alert, your heart beating too quickly, your thoughts circling the same fears over and over again. But eventually exhaustion wins. Your breathing slows. The room fades around you. And for a moment, just one, you forget the weight of the world. The night settles around you in a way that feels almost separate from everything that came before, as though time itself has slowed into a long, steady breath, meant only to guide you out of the harsh light of Tudor life and into something softer. You feel the weight of the past hours loosen in your chest, easing gradually, like a knot finally beginning to untangle. The fire burns lower now, its glow dim and steady, painting the room in amber tones that smooth out the rough edges of the world. You lean back, letting the quiet stretch, letting the warmth gather at your feet, letting the stillness settle like a blanket across your shoulders. The sounds that once seemed sharp begin to soften, blending into a distant hum that no longer asks anything of you. You breathe a little more slowly, drawing the air in through your nose and letting it go with a long exhale that eases the pressure sitting behind your ribs. The world around you becomes gentler with each breath. The floorboards no longer creak with urgency. The cold does not bite as fiercely. Even the faint crackle of the fire feels softened, like it has stepped back a little to give you space. Your muscles loosen one at a time, almost without your noticing, until your body feels heavier and more grounded than it has in days. The exhaustion you have been carrying finally starts to release its grip, not in a sudden collapse, but in a gradual surrender that feels almost kind. Your thoughts drift without direction, moving slowly from one impression to another, no longer tangled in fear or expectation. The light fades, The warmth settles, the breath in your chest deepens. You allow the last of your tension to slip away, and the darkness around you grows gentle, like a candle going out.